Good afternoon. This is Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters. We're talking with artists from the Masters of the American West exhibition at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles this afternoon. We're very pleased to have with us Peter S. Adams. Peter's a lovely artist. He's also the president emeritus of the California Art Club, one of the country's largest and oldest professional artist associations. Peter, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Jim, thank you for having me. What an honor.
So, Peter, I like to open these things up by asking artists to share with us a little bit about where they've come from in their careers. Would you talk a little bit about your artistic upbringing? You know, what brought you to be the level of professional artist that you are today?
Well, that's a kind of a long story, but I'd be glad to share it with you if you've got the time. I grew up in a family, and my father was an actor. In fact, his name was Peter Adams. That was his stage name, though. His real name was James Adams, and so I was named after his stage name. It's interesting. I have a middle initial, S, which stands for my mother's maiden name, which is Seitz, S-E-I-T-Z. My grandfather on my mother's side was a director, but he was also a part-time artist. He loved to paint. He directed all the Andy Hardy series with Mickey Rooney, all of them except for one. And he also sketched on set. And I have some wonderful paintings that he did of Mickey Rooney as a young actor, which is kind of interesting. On my father's side, his mother was a part-time artist, and his sister became a full-time sculptor. And so we had a lot of art in the family. And so when I decided to go into art, I was encouraged, and my parents really backed me up, and that was a wonderful thing. When I went to high school, it's kind of an interesting story. I was a junior, I believe, in high school, and I was boarding. It was a small school named Harvard, which is now Harvard Westlake, and it was, as I say, a small school. It was an Episcopal school, but it was also a military school. So we marched around, and we had guns, and we wore ties and caps and so forth. And I was not a very good student, I have to admit. I'm sorry, I just wasn't. But I did love art. I liked art. And because I was such a bad student, my parents said, Peter, you've got to go board at this school. They didn't have many boarders. They only had maybe 30 or 40 boarders in the school who would stay there, the whole week long and come home on weekends. And even though the school was only 15 minutes from my house. So I was boarding there, and we got a new art professor at the school. In fact, the only art professor I think they'd ever had. And his name was Mr. Akins. And he started this art class for all the young students. And unfortunately, they would put all their art up in the cafeteria when you went to eat. And of course, I had to eat in the cafeteria because I was boarding all the time. So I'd see their work up, and I just thought it was pretty bad. And I thought I can do better than that. And so I took their work down. I stole some paints from the supply store, which I could get in because I was a boarder and I could figure out things like that. And I put up my own paintings. And then I developed a nom de plume. I called myself VonSeitz. As I said, my middle name was, and generations back, there might have been a Von in front of it. So I called myself VonSeitz, and I put up these paintings, which I thought were better. And then I had access to the mimeograph machine, and I would mimeograph little flyers saying what a bad professor Mr. Akins was. And I'd make derogatory comments about his training and so forth. And pretty soon, what do you know, I became sort of the Robin Hood of the campus. People were talking about VonSeitz and who is this VonSeitz? No one could figure out who it was. Well, one day, Mr. Akins came up to me, and he grabbed me by the shirt, actually by the tie, and pulled me up like that and said, VonSeitz, damn it, I've got you. And I said, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not VonSeitz. I don't know who that he is. He goes, oh, you don't? I said, no, I don't, sir. He goes, okay. He puts me down. He runs up to the next little urchin and grabs him and says, VonSeitz, damn it, I've got you. You know, he was getting very angry about that. And of course, it wasn't that little urchin either. So then in assembly, I don't know if you remember the movie Spartacus. It had just come out. And the last scene in Spartacus is they ask Spartacus, will the real Spartacus stand up? The Roman centurions ask, will the real Spartacus stand up because they want to crucify him? And Kirk Douglas is a little bit slow getting up, and he kind of staggers up. Meanwhile, one person gets up and says, I'm Spartacus. Another person gets up and says, I'm Spartacus. And so pretty soon, the next scene you see is 100 people being crucified for being Spartacus. And so we had an assembly one morning, and they asked for the real VonSeitz to stand up. You know, it was getting to be too much of a ruckus around the campus, and they wanted to know who the real VonSeitz was. And so different, and I was a junior at that time. Then seniors would stand up and say, I'm VonSeitz, and then other people would stand up, I'm VonSeitz, all over the assembly hall. So that was pretty good. And then I actually had a sheet on over my head, and I came out on stage and said, I'm VonSeitz, and then I disappeared again. And so anyway, that went on for another year too, while I was senior. And it was kind of fun because I realized I could get a lot of attention by doing artwork, you know, and so that was kind of an interesting thing. I don't think I was really very good at it, and I don't know where those paintings have gone. They've probably well been thrown away in the trash, or they probably should have been. But then later on, when I went to college, I sort of majored in art, but I wasn't getting much satisfaction because all the art schools were very modern. I was more interested in traditional art, and I found a master painter. He was Theodore Lukits. He'd won the Prix de Rome in 1919. He was born in 1897, and he won the Prix de Rome at the Art Institute in Chicago. And he really was, it was like stepping back 100 years in time. You know, he talked about the great 19th century artists. We studied that. And I actually spent 7 years with him, working with him. A lot of times privately, and I worked as his personal assistant for 4 years. And that was really my art education for the most part. Although I did spend time at Art Center beforehand and Otis Art School too.
Yeah. Dan Pinkham also studied with Lukits, did he not?
No, he studied with Theodore, with Sergei Bongart.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Sorry for making that incorrect thing. So, Peter, you're notwithstanding all the work and the exhibitions that the California Art Club does, you're in the Masters of the American West, which is one of the foremost Western art shows in the country. Tell us a little bit about how your career has progressed to a point that's gotten you to this level of exhibition. Well,
now, Jim, I think you asked me two questions here. You mentioned something about the California Art Club.
Maybe I did. I mean, certainly California Art Club is part of your career. So just give us a little bit of understanding about how your professional career has progressed in terms of exhibitions and so forth that you've participated in.
Okay. When I started studying art, you know, after I stopped working with Theodore Lukits, I was 27 years old. And then I started doing solo exhibitions at different galleries. I'd usually do 1 or 2 exhibitions a year. And at that time, many of them would sell out, you know. There was a much better time in a way than it is now. There wasn't a really recognized art market here, though, so much. And I had one close friend, Tim Soliday, and we would talk on the phone every night. And, you know, kind of complain about the art world. You know, it's so modern. The Los Angeles Times, you know, the art section was very, very, very modern and didn't have any place for traditional art. And then one day, a lady called me up and asked me if I'd become a member of the California Art Club. And I said, well, yeah, I'll become a member for $15 or $10. I'm not sure what it was. Sure, I'll become. And then she said, well, now that you become a member, how would you like to be our next president? And I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. And I went to bed that night and I told my wife, Elaine, and Elaine said, well, look, all you and Tim do is complain about the art world. You don't try to do anything about it. Why don't we just reform this club? I mean, it was, like a lot of clubs, it was kind of a hobby painters group, but it had a wonderful history. And at that point in time, which is about 1996, I think, the plein air painting was coming back in Southern California in a big way. The auction houses were selling a lot of Edgar Paynes and William Wentz and Hanson Puthoff works, and Joan Irvine Smith had started collecting, and then other people had started collecting, and we sort of fell into that category. Tim and myself and a number of other artists, we'd all go off painting together, and we really very much admired the early plein air painters. So that was kind of my start. Tim got a number of his friends. We got about eight artists to join us in our living room one evening, and we restarted the California Art Club. It never died out. It was started in 1909 by William Wendt and Edgar Payne and a number of the early California plein air artists, and had a glorious history in the teens, 20s, and early 30s. Then when the Depression came, it kind of, and modernism came in just about the same time, it kind of went underground for a while. And anyway, we came and got our friends involved, and when they got their friends involved, and pretty soon we had 1,000 or so members, and it's just been wonderful ever since. It's just gone on ever since. Now, before that time, I'd actually gone to China twice. Once in 1981 on a plein air painting trip, China and India, and then once in 1987, where I snuck into Afghanistan and disguised myself as one of the Mujahideen and traveled around and painted in Afghanistan, and then went on to Bhutan and Burma and other places too. But so I've always had a great love for Asia as well. But that was before I got involved with the California Art Club. Yeah. So okay. I still great love for Asia, and I still want to get back there. We went back about 2-3 years ago with me and Jason C2 and Michael C2 and Calvin Liang and a lot of the other Chinese artists that we know, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the works that you've created for this year's Masters in the American West. I see that you've got one of them sitting to your side there. That's Secret Cove Afternoon Surge at Point Lobos State Reserve. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that painting?
Well, this is a cove I really love. It's up in Point Lobos, up by Carmel, and it's a quiet little cove, and the waves come in at an angle. What I love about the painting, what you gave me a chance to work on is, yes, you see, I use this technique called the one corner ma. I call it the one corner Ma. Ma Yuan was a early Chinese painter. I think he died in 1125 or so, really. But he would usually start off and have something in one corner that he would paint, and then it'd be echoed throughout the painting. So here I particularly specialized in this wave that's breaking here. And growing up by the ocean, the way the waves break really fascinates me. And to paint the actual anatomy of the wave breaking, even though it's done in a very loose style, fascinates me. But you see, I echo it here again, there too. Oh, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, there. And then you sort of echo that there again, and then there. And then that sort of echoes this to that again too. kind of an interesting composition, but I wanted to get the feeling of the whiteness of the foam and the foam in shade, which I really love this section in here, which is the foam in shade, and it is different colors of greens and blues and so forth, and then the moving of the ocean too, the rippling of the waves. And one thing that I love to do as a seascape painter is painting foam, because it affords me I can use my imagination so much when I make the designs of the foam patterns.
Mm-hmm. So another that you've got is Looking Out to the Sea, Oceanside, California. What's your story about that?
Well, that's by our beach house. We have a beach house in Oceanside. It's a little area called San Malo. And, unfortunately, the beach just kind of comes and goes sometimes. And this is the tide comes up against the rocks and then flows out again. That's a painting that I love, because it shows the sort of ebb and flow of the tide, or the waves coming in on the right-hand side of the painting. And then, with that sparkling sunset, I love painting exotic lighting conditions, lighting conditions that only last for a few minutes, such as sunsets or sunrises and so forth. So the right-hand side has the reflection of the sun and the water, and the left-hand side has the wave going back out to sea again. Sort of like the backwash as it goes back out in the ocean again too. So that was a fun painting to do. I really enjoyed that.
Another is Veneers of the Evening Tide, Oceanside. Is this done at the same place?
Exactly, Jim. It's done at the beach. My beach has a little bit lower tide at that time, but again, it's done an evening. And why I called it veneer is because the water has, if it's very thin, it looks like a veneer that we would have on wood, and you can see through it. And depending how thick the water is reflects either the color of the sky or the surface down below, and that has some of those qualities. But to me, that painting is kind of like a piece of jewelry. I like to deal with color harmonies and to play with that as much as I can and still be realistic. And so that to me is like an opal in a sense. It has these wonderful colors in the sky and then on the sand and in the waves too. And there again, you have another wave that's breaking, that you see just the tip of it being backlit by the setting sun.
Yeah. And finally, is your miniature evening shore break. What's your story about that?
Well, when I paint, a lot of times, a lot of people work from photographs, and I don't so much, but I do work from videos. And the part of the reason I do that is because when you're shooting videos of the ocean, you can stop it at every 10th of a second or so, and get a slightly different view, and you can really understand the movement and so forth. Now, the splashing of that wave, I've probably taken a lot of videos of waves splashing up against rocks or breakwaters or something. You usually don't see the transparency through the water as clearly as I painted it. Mm-hmm. That had a lot to do with my imagination. As a surfer and growing up by the ocean, I'd often jump into the ocean at night in the evening just before sunset, and you jump right into a wave and go through it. You close your eyes, and then that vision that you have in your head sticks in your mind. So I'm referring to a lot of those things that I have actually in my mind when I painted that piece. So a lot of that has to do with my imagination and what I think could very well be there.
Yeah, you've certainly captured a lot of action in that work.
Yeah, a lot of action.
So, Peter, when you're considering a subject, how do you decide that this is something that I want to turn into a work of my art?
Usually it's something that really hits me. Boom. I look at something and go, wow, what is that? And sometimes when I look at it, I don't actually understand what I'm looking at. It takes my mind a while to figure out, oh yeah, those are bright red clouds in the sky, and gee, it makes a wonderful harmony with these other, and there's a reflection off the ocean. And so I do like the spectacular. I know a lot of people, a lot of artists that I know like the still quiet voice, and that's very quiet and speaks very personally. But I really love the dramatic and the colorful, and so it to me is what really excites me. And not that occasionally I won't paint something that's intimate, but I really enjoy something that has wonderful abstract bones to it when I paint it too. I think I'm always looking for that, something that really captivates me when I see it. I don't know if I've explained that very well. Yeah.
Well, this year, all of your works are marine works, seascapes. But I know just from my many years of knowing you that your range of work is vast, and I would characterize much of the work that I've seen as spectacular. I mean, it's got that element of color and an excitement and so on that you're kind of known for. Peter Adams does not go quietly into the night.
Oh, thank you, Jim. No, I like to paint the spectacular. Whether my paintings are spectacular, I would like to feel that's right. But that's the judgment that others make.
Well, they definitely stand out. So over the course of your career, can you tell us a little bit about how your process might have evolved?
Yeah, sure. I love to go out and paint nature, so I do in oils and oftentimes in pastel too.
Right.
I'll do the little pastel sketches, and probably have a few around here I could show you. This is this is the painting that we talked about that I said looks like a jewel, right? Can you see that?
Yeah.
And this is the pastel sketch that I did originally. See that? So it's similar in a lot of ways. It's unfinished. I'd like to finish that up, and so I'll go out in nature and look at things and see what grabs me, and paint it right there on the spot, and then come back and think about it. And I'm certainly not averse to taking video too of everything. Now I do work in a lot of figured stuff too, and so that's a very different process. I come up with an idea, I come up with a thought, I costume models and pose them in certain ways, and it's always intriguing to do numerous figures in a work, and a lot of times I will like to work under exotic lightings, like a blue light coming down from on top and a orange or red light coming up from below, as if you maybe have a campfire and a moonlight coming. So, or something like that. I think that goes back to painting theater work, and I've worked a good deal with the Los Angeles Opera, and with their costumes and all their attire, and I've done certainly a lot of work too, and painted inside of many churches and throughout the world, actually.
Right. A lot of the artists in the Masters have got their collections of Western artifacts and Native American artifacts. You're the only artist that I know that's got his own costume department. You've got a large collection of costumes that that you deploy for your works on a regular basis.
I love costumes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just I just collect them because I collect them too. It's not just for artwork, but I do enjoy them. I especially when I was younger, I really enjoyed dressing up a lot too, and going to costume parties and things like that. That's always a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us, to share with us some information about your background and your work. We look forward to seeing you and Elaine at the Masters show in February. And thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Well, Jim, thank you very, very much. And thank you for taking the time and doing all this work for the Autry Masters. You've been very instrumental. You've been a good friend to me and a good friend to the California Art Club. You serve on our board as well. And you just, I can't say enough about you, Jim, and what you've done for the art in general. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. We have a mutual admiration society here. We'll see you soon.
Thank you much. Bye-bye.